all that she had to live on. Sometimes it feels like a text is just handed to you for stewardship season. I mean, what could be more powerful than Jesus sitting across from the treasury of the temple, watching all of these people give their money to the church? Pledge cards are out in the narthex in case you didn't get any in the mail. And then a widow, woman who has nothing, no one to support her, perhaps children that she must support, no family to do that with her. She lives in a world where your health care and your food depend on your family, a patriarchal system in which women are dependent on men. She has no one. She probably looks like she has no one. It's not like people walk around with a sign "widow" on their forehead. She probably looks shabby. Many paintings of this woman often show her carrying a child, very likely influenced by the story of the prophet Elijah, who comes across a widow who is making the last loaf of bread that she and her child will eat before they die. Jesus sees this woman, and everything rests on the tone of voice in which he makes the comment that is in the Gospel of Mark. Look at this woman. She is giving everything she has. It makes it sound like that's a good thing. Friends, I want to ask you an honest question. If you knew somebody simply did not have enough money for groceries, they did not have enough money for their diabetes medication, they couldn't ride a bus anywhere, and they walked into this church and they gave their last 50 cents, what would you say to them? I mean, really? Would you be like, "Yay, thanks, the church will use it for good. We'll take care of people, maybe people like you"? She gives everything, the last that she had. Perhaps, like the widow that Elijah confronts, it's all she's got. It's not enough to do anything with. Who can buy anything for 50 cents anymore? I'm giving it to the place where God dwells, and I am going to go home and die. It changes the tone of story, doesn't it? So often we have read this story as a kind of glorification of the generosity of the poor. Friends, when I was at my previous parish, a homeless camp developed across the street, sort of pre-COVID and during COVID. I witnessed a lot of generosity. But it wasn't the generosity of the poor. It was the generosity of community. It was the generosity of a people thrown together because it was the only corner on which they could live in that neighborhood, and they knew that we would provide them some water. It was a safe space for them. They had gathered around them people that they knew were safe enough. Because when you're houseless on the street, it's not safe. Nighttime is the least safe time. And there was community. There was a guy named Tex. He was the mayor of the little corner. I got to know Tex, and Tex was the one that I would go to when I'd be like, "Hey, happy to have you use our water. You need to pick up your trash." Because they had formed a community of care for one another, and it was the same kind of community, friends, that every one of us has in our families. They got just as angry at one another when the milk was left out, when someone else started shoveling their trash onto the sidewalk and wouldn't pick it up. And yet, those of us who have for the most part lived our lives somewhat more secure tend to use this passage as a way of talking about the beautiful generosity of the poor. But I don't think any one of us would say to somebody, hey, yeah, spend your last 50 cents on the church. I mean, I wish that the church was responsive enough that if they received that last 50 cents, they would give thousands of dollars back to this person so that they could live. But the church, we have not always had a good history of using our finances and resources wisely. We are like every other human institution. So it is possible that Jesus, looking at this woman, is not praising her, but lamenting. This story comes in the middle of a set of conflicts that Jesus is having with the political and religious institutions of his day, where he is consistently challenging them and the assumption that privilege and honor and wealth are what should be respected in a community. Everything that Jesus does in the Gospel of Mark is a reminder that God listens not only to those who have wealth and power, like Jairus, the religious leader, and his sick daughter, but he listens and stops and cares for those who have no place in the world around them, those who have been cast out, those who are not a part of a community. And Jesus does not ask them, did your behavior get you here? What did you do to get here? Why can't you work harder as a good citizen? Jesus simply says, how can I help you? How may I heal you? In this story, we don't know what happens to the widow. What I think we know is that Jesus looks at a world that allows widows to exist. Jesus looks at a world that allows somebody to only have 50 cents in their pocket. And he laments. Friends, we're not good at lament. We do so much to squish our grief down. And yet, grief is a natural and normal response to the loss of people we love, to the changes in our own bodies, to being born in a body that does not fit who society says we ought to be, to being born in a body that society says is inherently prone to violence. Grief is a natural and normal thing in the face of change, even good change. Friends, it was a good thing for me to come to this parish 2 hours from my family. That does not mean that I do not grieve seeing them, and I feel that even more as the holidays approach. Grief is a part of our acknowledgement that change is happening and that it is hard and that we are losing things even as we gain things. Many of us experience a lot of grief right now. And there are calls to pick ourselves up and move forward. And those calls come from all sides of the political spectrum. Grief has no party, it is not partisan. We grieve at the disunity and the divisiveness of our nation. We grieve for friends that we are afraid may not be safe. We grieve for the fragility of our own lives. Friends, Jesus looks at a world that is set up to create widows, a world that too often isolates us and alienates us and shames us and demands things of us that we cannot and should not give. And Jesus laments. Friends, we need to lament. We need to lament all that is before us. We need to lament with those who are vulnerable. We need to lament with those whose vulnerability only grows with time and policy changes. We need to lament with those whose vulnerability grows because of age and the death of a loved one, and of loneliness as friends die or move away. There is so much to lament in our world. And Jesus sees that world and laments with us. Jesus sees our vulnerability. Jesus sees the ways in which we feel unsafe, alone, insecure, despairing. And Jesus laments. I have no idea if this woman goes home and finds a full jar of grain and a full bottle of oil with which to make bread for her or her children. We don't get that in this story. What we get is a God who laments at a world where widows can exist. Amen.